So Nicole and I have been working with supporting teachers in our school district for a while with remote learning or crisis teaching or emergency remote teaching, however you want to call it. We've been working with supporting our staff because this is not a normal thing. And if you are, used to the face-to-face classroom, the good thing is a lot of those experiences that you started in your classroom, building class culture, building up a class climate of respect and trust, those things could be taken from what you've been done in the face-to-face classroom and basically brought in on online space to promote the same type of learning and engagement you want. And so with us researching and connecting with educators all over the world, and I mean all over the place, because both of us have friends who are teaching in different countries, we've really kind of boiled down this whole online experience down to 5 elements. And it's not to say that these 5 elements are the only 5 elements that you should be engaged in, but we feel like these 5 elements will probably give teachers a good framework in order to kind of grasp what's happening. And if we think about the fall, which I know right now we don't necessarily want to think about the fall in regards to like maybe the scariness of it all, but the reality is if we do have to face the fall with either doing some type of blend, full online or whatever, the reality is these 5 kind of like elements or principles or whatever you want to call it can be kind of helpful as far as framing that. So when we talk about communicating and communicating with your students, we're talking about engagement, feedback, office hours, and teacher reflection. These 5 elements have come through over and over again through our conversation with teachers, through our research of what's happening with other places in other countries going online far before we have. So that's where these 5 elements come from. We just didn't pull them out of the armpits the other day. We've been really working with these for quite a while. So that being said, Nicole, I think that's probably why we want to talk about these 5 things. And we have an amazing group of panelists today who are going to share their experiences and their stories with regards to these 5.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure I pointed out too that we've got our Padlet up and running. This is our round 2. We noticed with our first example of this where we had teacher panelists on that we were really heavily focused on literacy-based teachers. And so we reached out to a lot of math and science teachers and asked them to come on board. And we even have a health specialist as well. And so some of the pieces on here at the top are going to be more literacy-based, but as you scroll down, you'll see a lot of our panelists today will be adding information as well. So the Padlet is there for you to use as a resource. So Chris and I are kind of your district TOSAs that are going to be navigating the conversation today, but I'm going to turn it over to Erin to introduce herself, and then we'll just kind of go down the line of panelists. You can turn your video on and your audio on and just say hi, who you are, where you teach, what you do.
I'm Erin Pitney. I am a high school math teacher at ISB, teaching anywhere from Algebra 2 up through Calculus.
Hey everyone, Alvaro Francisco. I work at Mountain View Middle School. I teach 7th grade math.
And hello everyone, I'm Justin Bolton. I teach 7th grade math at Whitford Middle School.
Hi everyone, I'm Hina Malik and I teach math at Southridge High School, and over the years I've taught from AGS 1 to IB Math Studies.
Hi, I'm Emily Krutzik. I teach at Cedar Park Middle School. I teach both 7th and 8th grade math, and we do AGS 1 at 8th grade. So.
Hi, I'm Alex Bashu. I teach health at Aloha. I've actually taught 4th and 5th grade middle school. I taught at our alternative school, and I spent last year online teaching online for Beaverton School District. So I'm hoping to help out the best I can here. Hi, I'm Alex Bashu. I teach health at Aloha. I've actually taught 4th and 5th grade middle school. I taught at our alternative.
I apologize. Go ahead. Keep going.
Hi, I'm Taylor Osted, and I teach at Aloha High School. I teach math over there. Last year I taught AGS 2 and 3. It's like integrated math 2 and 3 and AP stats.
Hi, I'm Andrew Thompson. I teach 8th grade math at Meadow Park Middle School, and I'm glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Ellen Reynolds. I teach math at Beaverton Academy of Science and Engineering, which is a 6 to 12 option school. So I teach students in grades 7 to 11 integrated math 1 and math 2.
I'm Megan Poole. I am a 7th grade science teacher at Meadow Park Middle School.
We'll kind of move into our first topic of conversation. So we're really thinking about the combination of how are we connecting with our students and communicating with them. I know when we first went into emergency remote learning, we were really emphasizing that the first week back was all about connecting with our students. But since then, we've noticed that the connection and communication has been ongoing. And I think we've had a lot of conversations about how we're tracking that, how we are actually able to connect to students, what we're doing when we can't connect to students, and also some outside of the box thinking. So I'm going to kind of turn the mic over to Taylor to talk a little bit about how his school is kind of trying to work as a kind of collective group to make sure that they're connecting with kids.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So yeah, I think, I got a little sneak peek of what people are going to be sharing here, and you'll hear some really good communication tips for them. But I wanted to really kind of share what we're doing building wide, sort of systemically, to reach out to kids. And so we have a Google document with basically keeps track of all the kids who are MIA that we haven't been able to contact. Students who aren't passing, especially core classes. And there are different columns for teachers to provide feedback or log, communications and things like that. And basically we have an outreach team. It's comprised of grad mentors, campus monitors, counselors, and other people who are reaching out to these kids to try and get them to engage. And it's not a substitute for what the individual teachers are doing to reach out to these kids. It's in addition to, and it's all in a way to framed as a way to support kids. We're not trying to put pressure on them. We're trying to just let them know, hey, your teacher is checking in on you, wants to make sure you're doing okay. So does your counselor. So do the other people in the outreach team. And so it's just been a really good way to show our support to students and to sort of keep everybody in the loop.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's something that is going to be really interesting to hear from a lot of different places on how they've kind of collected that information. I know you were kind of mentioning that you guys had a Google Doc with a list of all of the students so that you at least knew someone was trying to connect with someone, right? So that those kids didn't necessarily fall through the cracks and didn't get some sort of connection. And I know we have another large school here that's using just a very simple Google form that the teachers are filling out as they have concerns about a student and want to make sure someone follows up. So I think if anyone out there does have more ideas on ways that the collective group is kind of trying to make sure students feel connected, I think we're all really interested into hearing how all of those things are doing. So I'm going to throw it over to Alex a little bit because I know she's got some of those outside the box thoughts when it comes to how she's uniquely connected to some students on Instagram. So I was wondering if Alex could jump on in.
Yeah. So we have a lot of students that just weren't connecting because I think of the academic piece. So I tried to think about where are they? I want to meet the students where they're at. So I started a teacher Instagram, and that's where they all are. And they found me, and they found me fast. So I had over 1,000 follows in 2 days. I actually connected with a few kids that go to the skate park and do other things and said, hey, make sure everybody's following me over there. And I've had so much more connections. So I'll have kids who haven't been into my Canvas class at all, but who are asking me questions, even like about food boxes on Instagram. And for me, if that student needs a food box, that's way more important than any assignment I could have given them. And so that's been a really cool way to connect with students, especially a lot of our students in that red zone have found me on Instagram. At least I know they're there, they're alive, they're safe. So that was my way to reach out and then just get a sneak peek. I'm not following them back, which I thought would actually not give me as many followers, but man, I post little silly memes or whatever, and they are all over it. So that's just been communication with where they're at, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm also so interesting enough, both Alex and Taylor both are at the same school, Loa High School. I'm gonna go over to Justin a little bit because he has been using video messages out to his students, and he's at a different school, one of our middle schools here. So Justin, if you could tell us a little bit about the video messages that you've been using every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to echo what Alex is saying about making sure that you're thinking about empathy and how are you doing and all the life things. That's very important. And I try to bring that in too with my weekly Sunday message to families. I try to keep it fun, but also be passing along information of where students can find some resources, or I also try to connect my topic to what's going on potentially around my house. And right now I'm within linear equations, and my bamboo patch started growing this spring, and I thought, wow, that's something we can track and plot, and it's going to grow fast. It won't be just like a small weed. And sure, it did. And it's fun for me, and I get great feedback from families and students, even if they get just to laugh at me. And I realize that I get to be that recipient. And it was hard at first, just getting going and thinking and putting myself out there.
Yeah.
But you know, with this, we just got to try things, and we got to do it. Lean into the challenge and push your own personal comfort level.
Yeah, I was just reading an article that Chris was sharing with me earlier. I think I talked a little bit with all of you earlier, all about humanizing the online learning experience. And they've really talked about, you know, sharing your life where you feel comfortable doing so helps to humanize it and bring the content home and let kids connect with you more. So I think all of the things you guys are talking about is really great. I wanted to throw it over to Erin Pitney, because she has kind of a unique piece where she's looking at some data through our learning management system. So we do use Canvas, which allows us to get access to some analytics, and Erin has a unique perspective on that. So I was wondering if Erin could jump in and talk.
Yeah, so our school is doing something similar to a LOA, where we have a Google document that we're keeping track of students, you know, who's participating and who's not. And our main way for testing that, because sometimes a kid will log on, but they won't necessarily turn in an assignment. Maybe they'll watch a video, but they won't finish everything. So you can go onto Canvas under analytics, and you can see when a student's last time that they checked your Canvas page. And so I'm just checking once a week, seeing who's checking my Canvas page. And if it's been a couple weeks since a student checked in, then I write them a personal email and just say, hey, I'm just checking in with you. I noticed that you haven't been on my Canvas page in a while. Is there something I can do to help? And I always try to like frame it that way. What can I do to help you out? Because maybe something's going on with them that I need to know. For the most part, they just were working on something else and got sidetracked and forgot to do their math for a week. So, but just a little nudge.
Yeah. I was reading an article that was talking about doing some sort of kind of like form at the beginning of your online course where you can get, they called it localized micro data, where you might ask something like, you know, is there anything that could prevent you from being successful in this course? And, you know, you never know unless you ask. And so they might come back and say, yeah, I've got, you know, 3 little brothers at home that I'm having to kind of watch while I'm doing stuff. So if you go back into the Canvas analytics and you see, ooh, these kids aren't accessing, or they maybe were only on for 10 minutes and I know that's not enough time for them to get that stuff done. Getting that little bit of information to be able to turn around and send that personalized email and say, hey, I know you have 3 brothers at home. Is everything going okay? Is there anything I can do? Like that little personalized piece, I think, can be really helpful, but using the data to kind of back it up and help you out, because otherwise, how would you even know if you didn't have access to that data? Yeah.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is that you can see what time of day was their last login. So if they're always accessing your class at 2 a.m., then you can understand why they're not coming to any of your live Zoom sessions, because they've sort of flipped their day.
I feel like we were having a conversation at some point, maybe about office hours, and I know I'm kind of tangenting off here a little bit, but I'm interested if you've looked at the times and if you've noticed a pattern, if you feel like any of your students are, for the most part, accessing things later in the day. I know round one, when we were talking to someone, they said, I can't schedule Zoom, any synchronous thing at like 9:30. They're not awake, they're not ready, they're not coming. 9:30 doesn't work. So I'm curious about that. The timing is interesting. Okay, anyone else want to jump in with something on communication before we move on to talking about student engagement? I'm horrible at wait time. Yes, go, Andrew.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Justin said. I've been doing a similar thing to what he's doing and making a sort of weekly welcome video, which, like Justin said, was also kind of hard to put myself out there at first. But I noticed that once I started doing that, I started getting more response. I've been pairing the video with like so watch the 2-minute video, and then the next thing is like a simple Google form to sort of check in. And I always, similar to what others are saying, leave a space in there for, is there anything else that I should know that you're comfortable telling me about how things are going? And then I always make sure to follow up, especially with those that I get back, that for students who are having, all kinds of things going on. And I've had a couple of really positive communications open up as a result of those little things. Just asking, I think, can be a very powerful thing. So.
Yeah, definitely. I find the spreadsheets with Google Forms just makes it so easy for you to quickly read through and see where people are answering that question, for sure. Yeah. Okay, moving into student engagement, unless anyone else has other ideas. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing that. I do think that, again, that humanizing aspect becomes so important. We have quite a few Go Formative advocates on the panel today. and so I was thinking that maybe we could talk a little bit about how Go Formative has kind of helped with some of the engagement pieces and allowing you to have some conversations. So I think I have on here that both Hina and Justin and Alvaro. Oh no, Alvaro had a revelation at one point. So I might go Justin and then Hina, and then Alvaro, I'll have you jump in as well.
Okay. Well, Go Formative, and really, it's not just always platform specific. I mean, you use what platform you have available for you and you leverage that, right? And we happen to be in Beaverton, we have access to Go Formative, and we've been exploring it. I always make sure within that assignment, what I like about it is housing the weekly video or that support video, as well as, and so they're going to one place.
Gotcha.
Some of those, those conversations of, where's this assignment? What do I do for that one? And Go Formative is a platform that allows me to embed all of those materials within one. But I'm also starting out the week, like people are saying, with something that's quite simple, or as it can be as simple as a question of what one word describes how you're feeling today. And that gives me that entry point to begin engaging in a chat of, oh, that's wonderful, or I'm sorry you're feeling that way. Also, part of my assignment is something that doesn't even relate to math. Maybe it is designing your own, how are you designing your study space? What does your schedule look like? And beginning to guide them in how to be that student. Some of those skills that we have as people who have gone through college, it makes sense to us, but these young people, it's a learning curve for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I like to make sure that during some of my classes, my Zoom meetings, that we're trying to do something interactive. Another Kahoot is another program that I can have my questions go through that, and it feels more like a game, bringing in that socialization piece. Again, like you're saying, Nicole, how do we humanize this process?
Mm-hmm. And I think when we start to look at ways that we are working with our colleagues to make things, because you said consistent and like housing things in one place. So I think the idea that you guys aren't alone in that. I know that we heard Southridge Math Department has also started looking at utilizing Go Formative or utilizing one place for the kids to all go. So I don't know if you want to speak up to that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there. Okay.
I thought you could see my video. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay,
Perfect.
so yeah, at Southridge, our math department, for all the subjects that we're teaching there, we're using Go Formative, and it's like the one-stop shop for students. So every week we have videos that we post on Go Formative where they're short videos where we're teaching them a little bit, and then there's practice questions that go along with it. And like Justin said, there's always a question where we're asking them how they're feeling, and it's a little mathy because it's going to be a graph where they're saying, okay, I'm in this quadrant this week, and then I can always give them feedback on Go Formative and say, okay, I see that, I hope everything's okay at home, or if I know something about them, like I know this was going on with your mom or your sibling. So that's always great. And since we're having those Zoom sessions with the students, and that's the time where we open up the Go Formatives, and then they're open after that, that's when they're assigned. So I can give students instant feedback, and that's something that students really enjoy. And it's cool that I can see them writing in real time, and they're getting that feedback instantaneously. And taking screenshots and sharing it with them is another thing, which has been really helpful for us.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's super interesting that a lot of it is so wrapped up together as we talk about that humanizing piece. We talk about kind of consistency and having that one place for students to come. And then that idea that we're constantly giving some feedback. I mean, those are all the things that we're kind of all talking about. And I know that we have people on here that aren't necessarily math specific, listening to us, but I don't think that this is content specific in any way, that those are all just things that we do normally. As good teachers, and trying to find a place or a platform that lets us keep doing that. Alvaro, I wanted to pass it over to you and see if you wanted to talk a little bit about what you're doing now and maybe some thoughts that you've had as we kind of move forward.
Yeah, definitely. So what I've been doing to engage some of the students on a weekly basis is have a weekly video, like Justin and the other teachers have been saying. And then I attach a Google form where they fill it out. 5 things they're thankful for, and usually I throw on a silly question like, is a hot dog a sandwich? Do you pour your cereal in first, or do you pour your milk in first? Things like that. So when they respond, I usually Wednesday or Thursday, I email them back, and I have a topic that we could discuss. And so yesterday, when we're doing the pre-meeting for this, I realized I could do it in Go Formative, where the feedback is like instant messaging. So they have that piece there that I could do that a little easier. But then I also engage students with my team. So we do a weekly Zoom meeting on Thursdays. Me and the other 2 staff members get together and host a optional Zoom meeting where there's no like academic piece. It's just saying hi. We give our updates, and we allow students to give us updates. And then we play a Kahoot game.
I love that. I think it's so interesting as I keep talking to more teachers about the like non-curriculum pieces that we're doing to engage kids and just get them to show up and so we can see their faces. I'm curious if anyone else has other ideas of things that they've done like the Kahoots to kind of inspire that engagement. I know Alex has a few ideas as well. I don't know if you want to jump in, Alex.
Yes, hi. One of the things I just did in my personal wellness class is I had them end with, it was a self-esteem unit, and I had them end with a compliment about someone else in our class. And then I said, okay, tune in next week and I will post the compliments everyone said about each other. And I had almost 100% participation on that lesson because that was what they would get in class. Normally that's an activity we sit around, you give a compliment to everyone at your table group, and who doesn't like to hear that? And I think curiosity killed the cat in that case. And it was cool because then I saw some kids log on that had never logged on, and then I could be like, gotcha, okay, what's going on? Where are you? How are you? You tuned in this time. I know you know how to do it. What can I do to keep you moving? So I use Bitmojis a lot to pull in student, and I also give them a lot of agency. So we started our sexual health unit online, so everyone can imagine that.
Fun.
And I let the kids, I put up polls. Okay, do you want to learn about STDs first or condoms first? Do you want to learn about blank or blank? And they get to steer the boat, and then it gives them more reason to log on because they're bought in. They want to be there because they had a say in it. And I did like Alvaro did too, where I'll have every couple questions, I'll say, okay, what's the hottest show on Netflix now? Just in the middle of like a quiz or whatever it is online. And they like to see the results of those polls and stuff. So I think anything I can trick them to get them on, I'm good to do.
Going where they're at, what their interests are, definitely. Thanks, Alex. I think those are great. I wanted to point out for Ellen, if Ellen can jump on, because I think you had really interesting kind of a side note on synchronous learning. Even though through Beaverton, we've prefaced to teachers that we are not asking that anyone do synchronous learning, but you and your teaching partner, I think, have done something here, and I'm super interested in the results.
Sure. So, and I also think that this is kind of, all of these other things are good, and I'm doing those, trying to personalize things, trying to do the fun things too. But sometimes I feel when I'm reflecting on some of those ideas, I think like, okay, but like, I don't know if that's me. Like, I'm not that fun. Like what I do is, be the nerdy teacher that teaches math or sometimes science. So, so I think I like to get the message out there that that's okay. And you can engage students even if you're your same old self and you think like, oh, they were always bored with me. Are they even going to show up? And so my colleague and I, we decided at the beginning of this that at least at the start, when they put out a schedule where we could host Zoom meetings for our classes, that we were going to have period 1, period 2, etc., and try to keep it short. We plan for like a half an hour. And that way, if it goes a little bit longer, we're okay. But we try to avoid the situation of just like assault of information. And it was just at the first kind of an experiment, like we'll do this and we'll see if this works. We'll do all these asynchronous things and we'll see how it works. And I found that these synchronous lessons on Zoom, where it's more like a class, often it's either direct instruction or a little bit of me do an example. Now you pop on to formative and I'll watch you live while we're all working together, or kind of you tell me your answer verbally or in the chat and kind of, call out like, oh, I've got 5 answers, but there's, 20 of us here. So what's going on? Are we stuck or just zoned off, or what's happening? And I found that they'll show up for that even if they're not doing the assignments. So even though I have videos of the same content posted online, it's completely optional. They don't have to come. They show up for that because it feels like school. And by the end of a couple weeks, several of them were saying in their like weekly survey, like, okay, I've been really feeling out of sorts with this distance learning, but now it's starting to feel like school again, and I feel better about that. And that's, then it's like, okay, well, I don't care if I have to teach the same synchronous Zoom lesson 4 different times for my 4 different classes. If you're going to show up for it, that's what I'm going to do.
I think there's something to be said about thinking about the routine of things, like being able to provide that for the students, that we're teaching for 30 minutes at this time, come if you can. Some of our students, I think we've heard from quite a few teachers, have really enjoyed that they get to work when they want to, but a lot of students really benefit from having a structure and having a routine.
Right, and the ones that aren't doing the assignments, I may not be able to engage them to that level, but if they show up and they get that dose of learning, that's something, and they know it's something, and their parents know it's something too. So that like the parents are a good reinforcement for, show up for class. At least whatever you do, at least show up for class. And
so I'm noticing, as I've talked to so many of you, that a lot of our math teachers do have open Zoom rooms, and at the same time will launch like a Go Formative lesson. So you both are doing Go Formative, watching the kids live, but you're also in Zoom rooms. I'm just curious, out of our panelists, how many of you are doing that? Because I feel like there's at least 3 or 4 of you that are doing that on a pretty regular basis. Yeah, so interesting. Okay, just watching our time, kind of moving us along, because there's so much we could continue to talk about with engagement. I'm going to kind of shift us over to feedback, unless there's anyone else that would like to add. Step in now as I kind of move us on. Okay. All right. So I was wondering if we could maybe hear from We'll start with Erin. We haven't heard from Erin in a little while, talking a little bit about Go Formative and providing feedback. And then I'll kind of shift to a few other ideas, I think.
Sure. Sounds like we're like rock and Go Formative here today. Yeah, actually, I had never used Go Formative until this time, and so this has been a good time for me to kind of like step out of my comfort zone and try something new. And the thing that I found that's pretty nice about it, I've only used it for assessments. I haven't sort of done the live chat thing. But it works a little bit like a text message, like you can write on it and then send a note back. And so the student gets a little note and they can see, you know, what they did wrong or what they did right, or it's instant feedback for them. And unlike some of the other sort of quiz tools that I've seen before, I haven't been able to give personal feedback on every single problem. And so since we have the Apple Pencils available to us, it's just a really easy way to write a message, send it, and then the student has it immediately.
And that is something we haven't necessarily told our audience. 2 years ago, I want to say, we went through the process of providing all of our secondary math teachers with access to an iPad and an Apple Pencil so that they could use that in their teaching. And we've seen almost everybody take great advantage of using it, both for grading on their own, but also actually physically in class. So it's exciting to kind of hear how people are using it at home too.
I should also say, for those of you who don't have Apple Pencils, you can also type your feedback pretty easily in the program as well. I'm a math person and I'm an art person, and so I love to write and draw feedback. That's me.
Yeah. I'm going to switch it over to Ellen, because I think you have some really interesting insight into how pass and incomplete grading has kind of shifted your thought process. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this thought kind of started, I remember, with a message our principal said in a meeting when we were first processing the news of what would happen with seniors and graduation. And so a question came up in the staff meeting: what if a senior they've already passed, but they decide to optionally continue participating in the class? Like, what is our teacher's obligation to them? So it was just a question. And the principal said, well, I hope if they would do a sincere effort that you would give them your sincere feedback. And I was hearing this, and I don't actually teach very many seniors, but I was hearing this at a time when I was starting to realize that we were going to have pass and complete grading at all grade levels. And so I started thinking, like, well, that's kind of what I'm doing. Like, the students have been turning in stuff. I don't even know if it's going to count for their grades at all. Like, at that point, I don't even know what a grade means, but they're turning things in, and all I need to do is respond. And it's less about percentages and things. And so kind of my mindset with grading and feedback has just been, if it's sincere work, it deserves my sincere feedback. And so I try to be detailed where I see detailed work, and where I don't see detailed work, like, I try to draw them in. Like, maybe try to do a little bit more than they gave me. But I feel like just meeting the students where we're at academically also matches those things that we're doing social emotionally.
Perfect. I'm going to switch it over to Taylor. We haven't heard from Taylor in a while, and he has kind of an end of the weekly reflection that I was thinking maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I think a big theme here has been consistency, sort of, making things as much of a routine as possible for kids. So there's kind of less stuff to figure out week to week. And so one thing I've done is I've always ended the week. My last assignment is a weekly reflection where students just kind of think back. I always ask, what did you learn this week? Where did you get stuck? What did you get better at? What do you still have questions on? And, it's been a way for me to honor the learning process instead of focusing so much on, like and things like that. And I think especially during these times when, we're learning about trigonometry and, some of these kids are, they're just seeing sine, cosine, tangent, stuff like that for the first time in their life, it's kind of a messy process. And so we just want to reward kids for being honest about where they're getting stuck, what questions they have. And, it's something that I thought I was doing in normal times in my classroom, but, I think this is one thing that I would really like to ramp up just, in the future in my classrooms as well, because I think it just allows kids to just buy in a little bit more. And, we kind of reward them for, just kind of where they're at and seeking that perseverance to get better.
Yeah, I think feedback is huge, part of that process, right? I'm going to throw it over to Alex really quickly, because I think she has a little bit different perspective. When she saw that we were going to talk about feedback, she interpreted it differently. And so I want to hear a little bit about what your thoughts were on that.
So I thought it meant feedback how I'm doing as a teacher. So I've been asking the kids a lot, was that lesson helpful? Was it better when I did the video or better when I did this? So I've actually been asking the students for a lot of feedback from me or on me. And then what I've seen is when they've been turning in work, the feedback I give them is it's always been well received, I guess, but even more so because I said, hey, did this lesson suck? I don't use that exact words, but how did this lesson go, or did this work, or did you guys like this? And then when I say, hey, I would love it if you added a few more details to X, Y, or Z, they're like, oh yeah, okay, because we're part of a team then. So that was, yeah, it was funny when they said feedback with students, I thought it meant like, how am I doing as a teacher right now?
Right. I think what we've seen so far, which is why we kind of shifted into bringing in teacher reflection as being a big part of the 5 things to support online learning, because I think unless you're a parent where you see the kids going through the process at home right now, it's kind of hard to throw your lessons out there into the ether and not get feedback from them. You wouldn't know really how long it might be taking them to complete assignment. You might not know how many screens they have to open or tabs they have to open in order to complete your assignment. If you're not, super planning that out ahead of time. So I think, feedback from students really helps us in this process. So I think that's super interesting. Is anyone else interested in sharing on feedback as I kind of move us? Because we still have 2 more things and we're running out of time.
Yeah,
Any
if
other
I
thoughts?
could really quick. So is my video on and everything? Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I am going to be another Go Formative proponent. I promise we're like not getting paid to do this, but the thing that I really like about Go Formative is that you can do video feedback. Sadly, you can't make the video through Go Formative, but what I've been doing is just making it on my iPad and like looking for student misconceptions and noticing, a lot of kids are flipping around the numbers for slope. They're doing run over rise instead of rise over run. And so it's really easy to make a quick 2 or 3 minute video. And then I try to personalize it by saying like, hey, I noticed you were having trouble with this problem. So it doesn't seem like it's too generic. Maybe they're on to me, I don't know. But that way you get feedback to students really quickly. And it's, again, feeling more similar to me too, like what we would do in a classroom.
But you're making just one video that you then
Mm-hmm.
can send out to kind of a larger group of kids, but it seems more personalized. I remember you telling me that. That was a great thought. And, I think Canvas allows you to do some of that as well, just like within the program. So I think, finding ways to do little videos, the research shows students like video feedback, but the thing is, and this is something we also kind of talked about, they need to know how to access it, how to get the video feedback. So that's a part, I think, of thinking about, are we giving direct instructions for the kids on how to like navigate through this process? Because I know I realized at one point that the students didn't even know where to get my video feedback. So teaching them how to do that, I think, is a part of the process as well. All right, we're going to move into office hours. And I think this one will go kind of quick, but I could be wrong. Is there anyone that hasn't talked in a while? We haven't heard too much from Megan. I'm not sure if anyone wants to jump in. Let's see. I might throw it over to Justin a little bit because I know that you've been really thinking on and kind of pivoting and changing and adjusting how you've been giving your office hours. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. But before we move totally forward, I love the video feedback, right? I think that's such a wonderful topic. I'm even having some students who are now beginning to send me videos. And we're realizing that this is a great way of communication and they're just filming themselves with something they're struggling with. Or I'm clicking on this button you told me to, and they show me their screencast. And that's so much, it's been effective, over
Well, I
a
think
series
someone
of
in the
emails.
group also kind of talked about how math has become so discussion based that I think video would be kind of a huge component of that process as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Back to office hours. I couldn't resist. Office hours, when this first started, they said 1 hour. And I thought, man, 1 hour, that is what my class is. But in this, if we're doing asynchronous, I feel like an hour would be a long time of Q&A. And so I broke it into 2 30-minute chunks so I could serve some families or their students' needs in the morning and a different maybe set in the afternoon. And I just think I think 60 minutes. I know some of my other colleagues, they're trying with the 60 minutes and they've said that it feels a little long.
Mm-hmm.
I think the 30 minutes you could do a lot in 30 minutes if you're quick, because you're organized going into that session already. You know exactly what you're going to cast on your screen. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the 2 shorter sessions, if you're thinking asynchronous.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to throw it over to Andrew really quickly because he did mention, I know when we had our little meeting yesterday, he was talking about kind of differentiating his office hours and trying different things. So I'm wondering, Andrew, if you can speak a little bit to that. So I feel like Justin's not the only one that's thinking a full hour is a really long time. I see in our notes that quite a few people have kind of shifted over to like 30-minute chunks, but you're also kind of pairing it with something else.
Yeah, I've sort of alternated days of doing Zoom office hours, which is in combination with my humanities and science team. And then also just having email office hours, which seems super archaic, especially in such tech-savvy company. But I just tell them that for this hour from 10 to 11 on these days, I will just be sitting there ready to essentially live chat with you. And I've found that the students that aren't really as interested in showing up to a Zoom session, I've been having some fruitful discussions with them just over the series of a few emails, and then in some cases also then steering those students toward hey, well maybe we can continue this conversation on video. And so just having a couple of different entry points has been helpful for me to engage students who are at varying degrees of comfort with their Zooming and texting and whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Because some students aren't necessarily super comfortable with Zoom. So yeah, having something else is a good idea. I have someone in the chat asking if there's anyone with multiple preps and how you guys are handling office hours and your timing. So I see Justin's kind of saying he's got multiple preps, and I'm wondering if anyone else wants to jump in too. Go ahead, Justin.
I also teach an AVID elective class that requires that I meet with that separate group, and I'm just scheduling yet another 30-minute chunk.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like Ellen was saying, with having that, here's my schedule. I think it's good that we have that predictable schedule, and if I need to teach again or cover again, then I do.
I'm also kind of curious because it was one thing I was interested in having a consistent schedule, like for all of our middle schools, a consistent schedule for all of our high schools. And there's been basic guidelines, but beyond that, it seems like a lot of the buildings have been able to kind of make their own kind of schedules. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that. I know Emily's kind of saying she split up her hours based on her preps. I don't know, Emily, if you want to talk a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I mean, I just did a basic math calculation of if I teach 3 classes and one of them is 7th grade and 2 are 8th grade, I take the hour and split it into 20-minute chunks. So I do 20 minutes of 7th grade and then 40 minutes of 8th grade. Sorry, I was like, does that math check out? But I was kind of agreeing with what Andrew was talking about, that I think if you have multiple preps, it probably just makes more sense to do something like email office hours, because then you can just say, here's the hour I'm sitting here, anybody can come. I've also been playing around with doing individual office hour signups. I know, again, we use Canvas and Zoom, and there's a way for those to work together. If you don't have Canvas, I think I heard that, what is it, Sign Up Genius has a way to, like, you could send kids there and they could sign up. And so that way you could have the hour for whoever wants to come.
Whoever needs it. And Alvaro kind of also mentioned that he does email a little bit, and then if a student requests a video chat, you do that then. Is that correct?
Yes, I do that. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Anyone on office hours? Is it working? Is it not working? Any thought process on how you've pivoted over the last 8 weeks or so?
Well, I think that it might be helpful to validate anybody that's feeling like, wow, they seem to be having a good experience, and I find myself alone in office hours and it's not working, because I hear that a lot from my colleagues, and I have spent many an afternoon with my office hours turned on and nobody there. But I'm having those synchronous Zoom classes. So for some people, their office hours are that connection piece. So for me, the office hours are just a bonus where kids can come in for help. And it is sometimes no one there. And so it's hard to think about, like, well, is that a worthwhile use of my time? And what I'm finding in these past couple of weeks is now there's more requests from students where they've, we've been doing this for a month, and they figured out, like, oh, yeah, I was kind of keeping up with things, but now the little things I was letting drop are kind of adding up. Or they realize, like, oh, now we're into more new material. It's not so much overlapped with what was old, and now I need some help. And so they get to that realization, much like you might in the middle of a semester, where it's like, oh, maybe I need to go and stay after school for help. And then now they're like, oh, how can I get that help? And then I remind them, oh, by the way, we have these office hours, and they come in for that. And then with the preps, I have 2 preps, and I had previously had separate hours scheduled, mostly because I thought it might be intimidating for my middle school students to enter an office hours where I might be helping a junior or a senior. But in simplifying my schedule this week, I put them together, and it's working fine, because I help a student with one question, and then I might say, like, oh, well, I need to help Danny over here. And, then that student, if they're done, they can leave. But otherwise they could be like, oh, well, let me just try a couple more of these on my own and see if I have more questions. So they take turns much the same way they would for after school help. Right. So I think of it that way.
I'm going to ask if Hina can come in really quickly, because she did have a conversation with me a little bit about how she has an everyday AGS1 class, and the community building that had happened prior to us going to release time really helps with the connection for office hours as well.
Right.
So,
I have Zoom sessions for my classes twice a week for my AGS1 Mondays and Wednesdays. And so I see them for an hour, and I know an hour is a long time, but to tell you the truth, I still have the few students who are coming to that Zoom class. I have some of them staying after that 1 hour and still chatting about things. And that goes to the community building at the beginning of the year, and we were fortunate we had that time last year, and they're all on Remind also, or they're connected with each other. So as soon as they come to class, let's say 6 people come to class, and the first thing we do is we start texting. Okay, let's text Johnny, and let's see if he's doing okay, if he's up. Let's wake up Hayden, let's wake up this student. And so in like 10 or 15 minutes, we have a good 50 to 60% students in our class, and it's a good way for us to check in with each other. And it works well, but I don't know what's going to happen. That's one of my concerns going forward next year, one where we might not be able to see each other. So I think we have to spend time, like I remember Justin talked about this the other day, but we have to spend time, we have to invest in making that community at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm going to move us into our last and final of the 5, which is teacher reflection. And I was curious if maybe I'm going to have Alvaro start because he had some thought process on the team that he's on and where you guys have gone over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. So with our team, we were doing different ways for students to access the work. One person was doing our Canvas calendar, other person was using a Google Doc, and I was using Canvas, but another feature called Pages. And to get more student interaction, we decided to all use the same feature, which is the Canvas calendar. And now students just go to the calendar, everything's linked, so it's like a one-stop shop for them. Even though we're still using different forms of teaching, they go to one spot to get the information.
Perfect. And then I wanted to make sure we heard from Megan because I have been going through this document that she started. I think she called it a skills wish list. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, Megan.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nicole. I
love it. I just want to say I really love it. I love that you have had that forethought to start creating a list, and hopefully you can share it with other people because I just think it's really amazing.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you. The inspiration is from just opportunities like this. I think a lot of people on this call right now probably feel the way that I did, that inspired me, I'm putting up air quotes, to make this, where it's just like I hear all these great ideas from other teachers. I try out all these different things. Some of them work, some of them don't work. I get feedback from students about like, hey, this is working for me. And then other students say, hey, the same thing isn't working for me. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a really hard time remembering things right now. So I just, in anticipation of thinking about next year and just kind of like trying to consolidate it all, I started a Google Doc that's basically just divided into like skills I'm really glad students have, skills I wish students had, or like I wish we had worked on, and then a column that says like things I really need to focus on making sure they know next year in anticipation of going into this. And then below that, there's also a teacher skills one. Like, you know, I haven't been too concerned with my students knowing about screencasts, but I have noticed that it is a skill that I really need to develop. And then I sent it out to my teaching team and a couple other teachers at the school, and they've added ideas, and it has been so helpful to see like what's working for other teachers and to be like, oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. And it's been helpful to get feedback from students too. I have really leaned on my students to see what's working and what's not working. Because from my perspective, certain things are working, and from their perspective, they're like, I am so confused. Yeah. Or like, oh my gosh, we should do more of this. Mm-hmm. So it's just like a culmination of all of the,
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, if we think about, oh, I wish I would have done this, you know, from September to March, I wish I would have done, you know, X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And again, we don't know what's going to come for fall. We don't know what's coming. So I think now is the time, as we kind of finish the year, what has worked. I think I would go to Justin a little bit because he has a little bit of thoughts on, you know, our do no harm kind of mentality, but also the idea that school year's ending. Okay, but what's coming next, and what have we learned? What can we reflect on so far? And the word I've been using a lot is transfer. What transfers from this learning experience to next year? So thank you so much for sharing that skills wish list. We put it in the chat, a copy in the chat, Jen did. So if people want to add more ideas and thoughts, I really love that idea of kind of being really reflective in that manner. So thanks for sharing, Megan. Justin, you feel like you could talk a little bit about the do no harm idea? Or if I'm putting you on the spot there, you don't have to, but.
Well, I think this whole process is about being put on the spot, right? This whole, yeah. We've really opened our homes. We've opened up so many things. So what's one more put me on the spot? I question, and it came out of our conversation too, and I was glad a few people echoed it. I question if the do no harm is actually caused some harm. We gave students kind of a free pass of, and we wonder why they aren't showing up to class, or they're not completing all assignments. And there are some people, and believe me, as these words come out of my mouth, I'm very empathetic to some of the family situations going around. But I also recognize that there are some students, and I've had to have meetings with their parents because their parents requested it. Like, my son feels, or my daughter feels, this is optional.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of that messaging as we think about the fall is, how do we message that yes, if you're impacted, we'll help you, but it's not a free pass, because we need to continue to educate and they need to continue to learn.
Yeah, it's an interesting narrative, and it's one that I think that we'll have to continue to think on in terms of, you know, from a state level, from the Oregon Department of Education to a district level, because it trickles down, and it is a narrative that we have. I feel like we as teachers have had to really think constantly, consistently outside of the box on engagement. But it's super interesting to reflect a little bit. Alex, I wanted to show it over to you a little bit, because I know you have a lot of ideas and thoughts on teacher reflection.
Oh, geez.
I'm just going to give it away to you.
Okay. I wrote so many down, I don't know which one. I think the biggest takeaway for us, we could fight this, we could be mad, we could do whatever, or my team and I just sat down and said, okay, we have freshmen. They are going to leave us. They are beautiful, wonderful creatures. What are the 5 things we want every freshman to leave our classroom knowing? And then everything else went out the window. And we just stuck with those 5. And that freedom allowed us to really focus in on what we wanted kids to know. So one of the things we wanted kids to know is every student to know how to access the suicide hotline, for example. And that way it was so we could laser zoom in on that the best way possible. And that's a really dark and heavy topic, and then what we did is say, okay, well, what does it mean to pass this? What did the kids have to do before March 13th to pass? And then what is a student who maybe wasn't passing on that day? And we decided as a department, okay, they pick 2 of these 3 activities and then they earn the pass, or you know, whatever we decided, because we were trying to individualize it and all of that. And I think that the pandemic is so individual. You know, everyone says we're in this together, but we aren't, because I might be on a yacht where one of my students is on a little fishing boat right now, you know? And so if I can just say to them, you do 2 of these 3 things and you pick, and this is what I wanted you to know at the end of the day, it really took so much weight off our shoulders. And so once we did that, things just took on this role, and we feel really comfortable going into the rest of the year. So that was our biggest takeaway, but it was a hard discussion amongst my department and with my team, because some people were so married, and I get that too, to like, well, we always do this Penguins lesson, or we always do this, and everybody finally got there over about a 2-week time. So I know we don't have much time left in the year, but anyways, and then that really guided thinking about some changes for next year as well. What were those 5 things? And gosh, did we really focus on those last semester? Could we say our kids walked away from class with those 5 things, or were we too stuck in the mud with all of these targets and assignments? So that was just a piece that my team felt was really helpful.
And I think I'm going to reiterate based on that. Ellen also kind of says that the close collaboration with her colleagues. I don't know, Ellen, if you want to jump in really quickly, because we actually did have someone in the chat kind of talk about feeling kind of isolated when we as teachers aren't together. So
yeah, and I'm really fortunate, and if I really reflect on this too much, I could cry on this call. But I had a close working relationship with this colleague. Really, we're on our 2nd year working together, and to the extent that she took on a 3rd prep just so that we would still be able to teach the same class as each other, which is now like the most valuable decision somebody made for me in the past year. And you know, we haven't seen each other since this started, but we're in daily contact and we're collaborating together, and it's been a really good check-in, especially as we notice our students like the emotional toll this is taking on our students, where we're math teachers and we have these ideas of what we should be covering, but when we notice things in the student work where it's like, no, we need to bite this up in way smaller chunks. Like we overwhelmed kids that really weren't going to be overwhelmed. And we're continually taking it in smaller chunks, and we might not realize that as quickly if it wasn't the other one saying, oh man, I think this was too much for my kids. Was it too much for your kids? And what can we do next week? And then also just the things that we're doing, we tend to be pretty creative. And so we make a lot of content that we're putting on Canvas, putting informative, all the videos, all the things. And we create all this work for ourselves, and to be able to divide and conquer some of that, like we find ourselves, on Saturday or Sunday thinking like, okay, we want all this stuff ready by Monday. How's it going to get done? And we just, don't look each other in the eyes necessarily unless we do a video call, but like just even on a text message, it's like we were both like, let's go beast mode and get it done. And just having somebody that's with you on that, even when they're not with you, it can save your sanity in this situation.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at our time. We are having some people say, thank you for sharing. And I really want to reiterate that. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. They have so many great ideas. We'll make sure to share a view-only copy of our slide deck here, because we have so many of their thoughts and ideas within the speaker's notes section. But also don't forget too that we do have the Padlet available. And if any of our panelists did not get a chance to share something super important, please go over to the Padlet and drop that in for people to access. And just to let you all know, and Chris, feel free to jump in at any time. Here's the bit.ly to the Padlet, by the way. We will be offering another session tomorrow, very similar to this, where our panelists will all be elementary students. We also are kind of looking into expanding out. We've really been relying heavily on our Beaverton School District staff to lead a lot of these panels. But if you are here listening and you have some ideas that you'd like to share, we're looking at possibly doing a round 3 where we open it up to the state and possibly larger. So if you are interested, please contact Chris or I, and we'll see what we can do to get that 3rd round on the plate here. And if you're interested in more, we've got a couple of more sessions, like I said, an elementary round tomorrow, and another kind of interesting thought process where we're gonna talk more on this concept, but also force some reflection and get people to maybe write some things down and think about that transfer a little bit more. What did I say? I meant elementary teachers. Yes,
I think that's legit. I think we actually could probably look at getting a panel of students.
Oh, did I say students?
Right, but basically, like Ellen commented like students, and it's like, you know what? This is the part we're missing.
Would be great.
Right? We have enough students. I mean, all of us are probably enough of us are parents that we could probably have our own students even share that space.
Oh my gosh.
Or know people. So yeah, you know what? Whoever commented, I think it was Ellen who said that. That actually might be something we might have to try to do.
Yeah, if you want to keep my 10-year-old busy for an hour,
absolutely, we could totally do that.
Be my guest. Be my guest.
Yeah. And with that being said, we want to say thank you again for everybody joining us today. I'm actually going to go ahead and stop the live YouTube stream, but we'll be posting our video on the OEN network. I think you can see it on the slide. And we are going to try to do round 3. We just need to kind of clarify with the ODE as far as the availability. And I think Alex had mentioned 5 things that she had used that terminology, like what 5 things we want our students to do. And Alex, I appreciate you sharing that, because there's so many things. Like there's 1,000 things we want our students to know and do. And I think our goal is to just try to boil it down to like, what are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that we could walk away with from? And I like the idea that everybody in our panelists was sharing from their heart what's been happening, their experiences. And our chat has been phenomenal. Like for all of you who are listening at home, whether you're at the beach or wherever you're at today, I appreciate your sharing in the chat. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and stop our live presentation. Again, 1,000 thank yous for all of our attendees who've showed up.